My husband poured me a very full glass of red wine and called it special, while my younger sister watched my hand with a little smile. I lifted it to my lips and tasted metal. I smiled as if I believed him, stood to fetch the salad, and quietly switched my glass with hers. She raised it to toast love and took a proud sip. And 30 seconds later her face changed while he said her name in a frightened voice. I did not shout. I simply looked at both of them and thought, tonight the truth will drink for me. Thank you for watching. Please tell me in the comments where you are watching from. My name is Edna, and I live in Alaska, where the air in winter feels like glass when you breathe, and the nights can stretch long enough to make you hear your own thoughts. I have been married a long time, and I learned to carry the quiet parts of that life with steady hands. I cooked the dinners, kept the bills paid, smiled at neighbors, and told myself that small disappointments were only little stones under a wide river. But lately, the river sounded different. He came home with a new cologne that did not suit him. There were 2 lipstick smudges on 1 coffee mug before the sun was even up, and my younger sister began stopping by with a shine in her eyes that was not meant for me. I told myself to breathe and to be careful with what I believed, because a woman can break her own heart by guessing wrong. So I watched the tiny things, the missing receipt, the late call, the quick tap of a screen turned face down. I kept my voice soft and my steps measured, because when a person wants you to doubt yourself, they talk louder and move faster. I did the opposite and moved slowly. And as I set that dining table tonight, with the good plates and the folded napkins, I told myself that truth does not need me to shout for it. It only needs me to see it and to stay calm when it arrives. All week, I kept my pace even and my eyes open. I folded laundry and found a receipt for a dinner he never mentioned tucked between his shirts. I watered the fern by the window and watched my younger sister linger too long over a joke that was not funny. I heard his voice soften on calls when he thought I was in the pantry, and when I stepped out, he would clear his throat and say it was nothing important. I noticed the way he started to smell like a hotel lobby at odd hours, that polished blend of cleaner and cologne that does not live in our house. And I told myself to let the facts stack gently instead of throwing them like stones. So I counted the small changes, the new password on a phone that used to sit open on the counter, the sudden interest in late meetings, the way he started calling me darling in a tone that felt rehearsed. I kept my hands busy and my voice quiet because noise would only blur what I needed to see. I wrote the dates down in a little notebook, and next to each one I wrote how my stomach felt, because the body is honest when the heart wants to be kind. And every entry read the same. A thin ache behind the ribs, a cold little bell that kept ringing even while I stirred soup and smiled at the doorbell. By the time the dinner invitation went out, I already knew the truth would arrive. I did not know its hour, only that it was walking toward my table, step by careful step. And I promised myself I would meet it, standing tall, breathing slow, and ready to speak only when it was time. At the farmer's market, a neighbor mentioned seeing them laughing together at a hotel restaurant on a Tuesday night. He told me he was working late. I smiled and asked about the peaches and paid in exact change. Then I walked home with a steady step and set the bag on the counter and opened our old tablet to check the family calendar. There was nothing on it but a shipping notice slid across the screen from a store I did not recognize. I tapped it and read the bland words about a delivery of a strong sleep aid that warned against mixing with alcohol. I stood very still and felt the kitchen tilt. And then I set the tablet down and began to breathe slow. I pulled out the small camera my granddaughter once helped me set up for holiday pictures, and I placed fresh batteries in it. I checked the angle, the red light blinked, and I told myself I would let the truth show itself without me raising my voice. I polished the good glasses, I ironed the tablecloth, I wrote the emergency number on a small card and tucked it under my phone so my hand would not shake when I needed it. And I decided that on the night I served dinner, I would not accuse or plead. I would simply be present. Watch the pour. Listen for the change in tone, and speak only when the room itself had finished telling the story. The night before the dinner, I stood in the bedroom folding his shirts and felt paper crinkle under my palm. I slipped my hand into the inside pocket of his jacket and drew out a note written in a looping hand I knew too well. The words were soft and foolish and full of promises, forever, our secret. After she is gone. And those 4 words made the room lean until I steadied myself on the dresser. I read the note twice and then a 3rd time. Not to torture myself, but to make sure I was not inventing what I feared. And when the truth sat plain in my hands, I folded the paper along its old crease and slid it back where I found it. I did not scream or break or beg. I walked to the kitchen and washed an apple I did not want. I cut it into careful slices and ate each one, while looking at the places I had shined and scrubbed for years. I thought about how a person can live beside you and still be building a separate house inside their heart. And I promised myself that tomorrow I would not perform my pain for anyone. I would not give them the spectacle they expected. I would set the table, place the flowers, check the little camera once more, and keep my voice even. I would let him pour. I would taste as little as needed to know, and if the metal returned to my tongue, I would move with the plan I had prepared. The card with the emergency number under my phone, the door unlocked for the paramedics, the proof I had gathered tucked away in a neat envelope. And when I finally lay down, I did not sleep so much as float above my own body, listening to the clock count seconds, and telling myself that morning would not make me smaller. Morning would make me ready. Morning came thin and gray, and I rose without the alarm. I changed the sheets, opened the windows to let the sharp Alaska air clear the rooms, and I moved through the house like a woman counting steps to keep from shaking. I set the table with the good plates and the linen napkins that only come out on quiet holidays. I placed a small vase of white flowers in the center, because I wanted the table to look honest, even if the people at it were not. I checked the little camera and watched the red light blink once. I lined up 3 clean wine glasses on the counter and set my phone within reach with the card tucked beneath it. I seasoned the roast, glazed the carrots, and folded a towel over the handle of the oven, the way I always do when I want to feel steady. I showered and put on the dress that makes me stand a little straighter. I looked in the mirror and told the woman there that fear is loud and truth is quiet. And tonight, I would be the quiet one. In the afternoon, he sent a message that he was excited for dinner and that my sister would come right from an errand. I typed back a simple thank you and set the phone down. I lit the candles at dusk and let the rooms grow warm and calm. I breathed in and out and promised myself that if my hands started to tremble, I would rest them on the back of the chair and wait for the feeling to pass. I would not accuse, I would not explain. I would let the evening walk to the place it meant to go. And when the doorbell finally rang, I felt almost weightless, as if the day had already decided my part, and I only had to follow it with care. They arrived almost together with the cold still clinging to their coats. He stepped in first with that cheerful voice he saves for company and set a small wrapped box on the entry table, as if he had remembered a holiday. My younger sister followed with perfume too sweet for winter and a smile that skimmed right past me to land on him. I took their coats. I asked about the roads. I said dinner was ready and the house felt warm. I led them to the table and saw his eyes move to the 3 glasses I had placed on the counter. I kept my breath slow and my hands gentle as I lifted the roast from the oven and told them to sit. He circled the kitchen like a man who wants to be helpful, but mostly wants control. He found the bottle he had chosen and held it like a prize. He called me darling in a tone that sounded polished rather than tender. My sister laughed at nothing and tucked her hair behind her ear as if a camera were on her. I noticed a faint red line on the inside of his wrist that looked like the mark left by a tight cap, and I folded that into the quiet pile of things I knew. I set the salad on the table. I straightened the napkins. I made small talk about the frost on the windows and the long nights that make a person think too much. I watched his hands as he turned the corkscrew, the little frown when the cork resisted, the breath he took when it finally gave. I watched the shoulder of the bottle tilt and catch the candlelight, and I placed my phone within reach as if to check the time. I told myself to be steady, and to let the room speak first. Because rooms do speak when you stop filling them with excuses. He raised the bottle and smiled at both of us. He said this bottle was special and that he had been saving it. My sister leaned forward, her eyes bright and eager, and I nodded as if nothing inside me had moved. The camera's tiny light blinked in the corner where I had set it earlier. The flowers were calm in their vase, the plates were ready, and the only thing left to do was to let the evening step into its next sentence, while I stayed exactly where I was, breathing slow and listening for the truth that had been walking toward me for a very long time. He tilted the bottle and filled my glass higher than good manners require, while keeping his own modest. He lifted it to the light and spoke of ripe berries and old oak as if poetry could hide a plan. He set the glass before me and waited for my mouth to move. I brought it close and let the rim touch my lip without drawing more than a breath of it. A faint taste like coins and the inside of a cold spoon pressed against my tongue. I kept my face soft and praised the color. I set the glass down and said I had forgotten the warm bread on the counter. I rose with an easy smile and walked to the kitchen island where the basket waited, my hands slow and tidy as I laid a cloth over the slices. And in that small motion that belongs to women who have had to learn the art of surviving without shouting, I traded the place of 2 glasses on the table. I did not rush. I did not tremble. I only adjusted a napkin and turned a plate as if straightening a setting. Then I came back with the bread and a little dish of butter and asked him to carve the roast because he always liked to do that. He stood with a proud smile, and my sister leaned forward, eager to toast what none of us would name. I folded my hands in my lap and watched the candle bend in a draft from the hallway. I listened to the clock on the stove count even seconds, and I told myself that whatever arrived next I would meet it with a steady voice and a clear memory. Because a person who has been treated like a shadow learns to see everything, and tonight I saw enough. She lifted the glass that had been set in front of her, and with a bright smile she said, "To love and to new beginnings." She took a deep sip and laughed at the warmth, and then the laugh thinned into a cough. A quick cough became a rasp. Her hand rose to her throat, and her eyes widened as if the room had suddenly tilted. He said her name once and then again, louder each time, pushing back his chair so hard it scraped the floor. And I stayed seated for one slow breath so I would not let fear choose my words. Then I stood, took my phone, and pressed the emergency number I had ready. I gave our address in a clear voice. I said there may be a sedative in 1 glass of red wine. I said one guest is coughing and struggling to breathe. I said I can see her pulse racing in her neck and her skin turning pale. The operator asked me to keep her upright and to watch her breathing. I told my sister to lean forward and rest her hands on the table edge. I told him to give me space and to open the front door because help was already on its way. He kept saying it was a mistake and that it was nothing. And I looked at the table where the bottle sat like a quiet witness, and at the small camera light blinking in the corner. My hands were steady as I moved the chairs aside. I spoke the number of steps from our door to the table so the paramedics would know where to come. And while he hovered and pleaded, I kept my tone even, because panic is a fire and calm is water. And I have lived long enough to know which one saves a house. The siren grew loud and then stopped short of the door, and I told him again to step back while 2 paramedics came in with calm eyes and quick hands. They checked her airway, asked what she drank, asked who poured. I answered clearly and pointed to the glass that had been placed before me and the bottle that he had chosen and opened. They eased her onto the stretcher. One of them nodded at me for the details again, and I repeated the address. The time, the words I had read on that shipping notice, and the warning about alcohol that still rang in my head, they left with her, and I followed in my own car because I wanted to speak where bright lights make lies look small. At the hospital, a nurse took my statement, and an officer asked careful questions. I kept my voice even and my hands folded. I said I had tasted metal and switched the glasses while I fetched the bread. I said the camera in my kitchen was on and that it had a clear view of the counter where the pouring happened. I said there was a shipping notice on our tablet, and that the name of the medication matched what a nurse friend once told me, never to mix with a drink. He said it would be examined, and that the doctors would run tests. And while my sister lay pale but breathing, and my husband paced with a face arranged into worry that came too late, I took the small envelope from my bag and handed the officer a copy of the note I had found in his jacket and a printout of the delivery email. He tried to call it a joke that went wrong, and I watched the officer write and not nod. And when the questions paused, the officer thanked me for staying steady and told me to go home and rest, and that someone would follow up after the initial results. So I walked out into the cold night with the kind of quiet that follows a storm. And I told myself I had done what I could do, and that dawn would tell the rest. I unlocked the house, and the warmth reached for me like a memory. And I moved through the rooms without turning on many lights, because I wanted to keep the calm I had worked for. I set my bag on the chair. I picked up my ring and laid it beside 2 untouched wine glasses on the sideboard, like a small truth left where anyone could see it. I packed a suitcase with what I needed for 3 nights, and then a second small bag with the papers that mattered. I called a locksmith and made an appointment for morning. I sent a message to a lawyer a neighbor had once recommended, and I wrote 3 lines about the situation and asked for a meeting. I turned off the camera and placed it in a drawer after saving the recording to a drive. My granddaughter helped me label months ago when I did not know why I would need to be so careful. I walked from window to window and opened the curtains and let the winter night look in without fear. I made a cup of tea and held it in both hands until they stopped feeling like someone else's. I wrote a list on a plain page, close accounts that are joint until counsel advises, change the passcode on the tablet, speak to the bank, rest, breathe, keep my name, keep my peace, keep my kitchen. I stood at the table and smoothed the linen with my palm and felt the shape of my life return under the cloth. And when I finally lay down, I did not count the hours until morning. I let them pass, and with each one I told myself the same sentence. I am still here. I am steady, and I will not carry what is not mine anymore. Morning brought the locksmith first, and I watched the old locks come off the doors, while the kettle warmed, and the house felt like it was exhaling for the first time in months. Then the officer called to say the lab confirmed a strong sedative in the wine, and that the bottle and glasses were in evidence along with the little camera I had handed over. He said my sister was stable and awake, and that she had admitted to the affair, and to knowing he brought that bottle for a private toast after dinner. He said the purchase records matched the notice I had shown them, and that more questions would follow. I thanked him. I set the phone down, and I let the quiet tell me I had done what a careful woman can do when she refuses to disappear. The lawyer met me before noon, and we spread papers across the table I had ironed last night. We made a list of steps that looked like a ladder out of a deep well: temporary orders for safety, separation filings, financial holds where needed, a written request for no contact except through counsel. I called the bank and spoke in a voice that did not shake. I closed the joint card that had been opened for convenience and had become a rope. I changed the passwords that used to be small anniversaries and made them long and new and mine. He tried to call and then tried to message. He used words like mistake and misunderstanding and begged for a meeting. I replied with a single sentence that counsel would be in touch, and that until then I wished safety and distance for all involved. The light turned blue against the snow outside, and the house began to feel like a place that could hold peace again. I washed the good glasses and set them back on the shelf. I put the ring in a small box and slid the box into a drawer I do not open without purpose. I took a slow walk around the rooms and touched the backs of chairs, the way a person checks the legs of a bridge after a storm. In the following days, the officer returned for a short interview and thanked me for the clarity of my records. My sister sent a message through a nurse that said she wanted forgiveness. And I wrote back that forgiveness lives in the same town as consequences, and that I was not moving away from either. I was not cruel, and I was not sweet. I was steady. I was busy living. I cooked a simple supper for 2 friends who have known me long enough to see when the color returns to my face. We sat at the table that had held so much fear, and we ate quietly. And then we laughed at a memory that had nothing to do with him. Later I made ginger tea and the steam rose in thin ribbons, and I thought about how freedom does not arrive with trumpets. It arrives like a door that opens without sticking. I slept through the night for the first time in too long, and woke to a snow sky that looked clean. Papers moved forward, calls were answered, the world did not end. It simply changed shape around the truth. And when I stepped outside to brush the steps, I felt a kind of strength I had forgotten. Not the kind that shouts, the kind that comes from knowing that even in winter a house can be warm when the person inside of it is no longer explaining away the cold. Spring came quiet, and I planted new flowers along the walk where the snow had once piled high. The lawyer called to say the last papers were signed and that there was nothing left for me to answer. I thanked him, and then went out to the yard and stood in the sunlight until I could feel it settle in my bones. I spent the next weeks putting the house back into the shape I wanted, repainting a wall, replacing curtains, rearranging the shelves so that nothing reminded me of the years I spent shrinking myself to fit someone else's comfort. I kept the white vase from that dinner, but filled it with wildflowers instead of roses, because I wanted something that grew freely and not something that needed constant tending. Sometimes I would think about the night of the wine and the way silence had held the truth for me until I was ready to speak. And I would whisper to myself that calm is not weakness, it is wisdom wearing a steady face. I learned that you do not have to shout for justice, you only have to stay long enough for truth to show itself. And now when evening comes and the light slips through the windows, I sit with my tea and let peace stretch across the table like a soft cloth. I think about how close I came to being erased and how I chose, instead, to stand still until the storm passed. And I remind myself that the smallest decision, the quietest act, can be the one that saves your life. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I hope my story touched your heart. Please subscribe so you can hear more stories like this one, and tell me in the comments what this story made you feel. I'll be reading every word.